My life flashed before my eyes, not in a calm, reflective way, but in a searing, agonizing flash of betrayal and terror. I was in active labor, my water had just broken, and the man I married, the father of my child, was shoving me out of his car onto a deserted desert road. He looked at me, utterly devoid of humanity, and drove away, leaving me to die. I never imagined my marriage would end on a dirt road 20 miles outside Phoenix, with contractions tearing through my body every 4 minutes, my husband's taillights disappearing into the vast, indifferent desert darkness. But before I tell you about that horrifying night, you need to understand how I ended up there. My name is Victoria Hayes, and 3 years earlier, I married Daniel Whitmore in what everyone called the wedding of the season. His family owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across Arizona, the kind of wealth that came with expectations and insidious strings attached. I was just a pediatric nurse from a middle-class background, and Daniel's mother, Patricia Whitmore, made sure I never forgot I'd married up. The problem started subtly, almost innocently. Patricia would rearrange my kitchen, declaring my system inefficient. She'd critique my clothing, suggesting I needed to dress more appropriately for someone carrying the Whitmore name. Daniel? He always just laughed it off, telling me his mother meant well, that she was just particular. I should have seen those blazing red flags. Instead, I got pregnant. My pregnancy was difficult from the very beginning. Crippling morning sickness kept me bedridden for weeks. By my second trimester, I was diagnosed with gestational diabetes and preeclampsia. My doctor was clear. I needed bed rest, careful monitoring, and absolutely no stress. Patricia's response? To tell Daniel I was being dramatic. Women in her day worked right up until delivery without all this fuss about complications, she'd sneer. Daniel's sister, Veronica, was even worse. She was 35, unmarried, and seemed to harbor a deep, burning resentment for my relationship with her brother. She'd make these passive-aggressive comments like how I'd trapped Daniel with a baby, or how convenient it was that I'd gotten pregnant so quickly after the wedding. Every single family gathering became an endurance test. The Sunday it all utterly fell apart started like any other visit to the Whitmore estate. I was 38 weeks pregnant, swollen, and utterly exhausted, but Daniel insisted we attend his mother's birthday brunch. I'd been having Braxton Hicks contractions all morning, practice contractions, uncomfortable but not the real thing. My doctor had warned me that with my complications, labor could progress incredibly quickly when it started, and I should head to the hospital at the first sign of real contractions. We arrived at the mansion around 11 a.m. Patricia greeted us at the door, her eyes immediately darting to my stomach with barely concealed distaste. I'd gained 42 pounds, most of it fluid retention from the preeclampsia, and I knew she found it unseemly. The brunch was in full swing when the first real contraction hit. I was in the kitchen trying to help Patricia's kind housekeeper, Carmela, carry serving dishes to the dining room. A pain unlike anything I'd felt before radiated across my lower back and abdomen. It was sharper, more intense than any Braxton Hicks. I gripped the counter, trying to breathe through it. "Are you all right?" Carmela asked, her face etched with concern. I just nodded, waiting for the pain to subside. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was overreacting, just like Patricia always said. 30 minutes later, another one came. Then 20 minutes after that, another. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking, and started timing them. They were irregular but definitely happening. I found Daniel in the living room, talking business with his father, Lawrence. "Honey, I think we might need to head to the hospital soon," I said quietly, desperate not to make a scene. "I'm having contractions." Patricia, ever vigilant, overheard. She set down her mimosa with a sharp clink. "Contractions? Victoria, you've been having those false contractions for weeks now. You're not due for another 2 weeks. This is just more of your theatrics." My blood ran cold. "These feel different," I tried to explain, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Stronger, more regular." "First-time mothers always panic at every twinge," Patricia declared to the room, as if I wasn't even there. "My own doctor told me that most of what women think is labor is just anxiety. Victoria, you need to stop being so dramatic. This is my birthday celebration, and I won't have you disrupting it with false alarms." Veronica appeared from the hallway, her designer heels clicking imperiously on the marble floor. "Honestly, Vic, the attention-seeking is getting old. We get it. You're pregnant. But the rest of us don't need constant updates about every little discomfort." Daniel looked between his mother and me, his face uncertain. "Maybe we should just—" "Daniel, your wife is fine," Patricia interrupted, her voice like ice. "She's been fine for 9 months despite all her complaints. Now, Victoria, since you're feeling well enough to interrupt my party, you can make yourself useful. I forgot to ask Carmela to bake an apple pie for dessert. The ingredients are in the pantry. You can handle that, can't you?" I stared at her, my mind reeling. Another contraction was building, pressure mounting in my pelvis. "Patricia, I really think I need to go to the hospital." What you need is to stop pretending every little ache is an emergency, she snapped, her eyes narrowing. First pregnancies are always full of false labor. My doctor told me as much when I was pregnant with Daniel. You're creating drama where there is none. Now, are you going to make that pie? Or are you going to continue being difficult? The pain crested, stealing my breath. I doubled over slightly, gripping the back of a chair. Victoria, stop it. Patricia's voice was chillingly cold. This is ridiculous. You're embarrassing yourself and my son. Pull yourself together. Through the haze of pain I saw Daniel's face. Embarrassment. He was embarrassed by me. I'm not pretending, I managed to gasp. Something's wrong. The baby is fine, Patricia said dismissively. You're just high-strung and looking for attention. Daniel, take your wife to the kitchen and have her make herself useful. Maybe some activity will calm her nerves. I looked at my husband, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything. Instead, he put his hand on my elbow and started guiding me toward the kitchen. Come on, Vic. Let's just do the pie, okay? Then we can leave early if you're still not feeling well. Tears burned my eyes as another contraction built. They were getting closer together, 15 minutes, maybe less. I needed to be at the hospital, not baking dessert for people who thought I was faking a medical emergency. Daniel, please, I whispered, my voice raw with fear. I'm scared. This doesn't feel right. My mom's probably right, he said, not meeting my eyes. You've had false alarms before. Let's just get through lunch and then we'll go home and rest. Okay? I pulled away from him, a surge of adrenaline mixing with my pain. I'm going to the hospital. With or without you. Veronica's voice cut through the tense silence. Before you go anywhere, Victoria, where's my bracelet? I turned to face her, utterly confused. What bracelet? My diamond bracelet, she said, her voice rising in pitch. The one Daddy bought me for Christmas. It was in the guest bathroom upstairs and now it's gone. You were up there earlier. My mind struggled to focus through the pain. I went to the bathroom, yes, but I didn't see any bracelet. I didn't take anything. That bracelet cost $12,000. Veronica shrieked, advancing on me. It was sitting right on the counter and now it's gone. You're the only person who's been up there. I didn't take it, I said, my voice shaking. I went to the bathroom and came straight back down. I didn't even look at the counter. I was having contractions. Convenient, Veronica sneered, a cruel smirk on her face. Blame the fake contractions. You know what I think? I think you've been eyeing that bracelet for weeks. I think you saw an opportunity and took it. Poor little working-class Victoria, jealous of what we have. That's insane, I protested, feeling a wave of nausea. Why would I steal from you? Because you're not one of us, Patricia said coldly, stepping forward to stand beside Veronica. You never have been. Daniel may have been foolish enough to marry you, but we all know what you are. A gold digger who trapped my son with a pregnancy and has been milking this family for everything you can get. The room spun. Another contraction ripped through me, stronger than before. I grabbed the doorframe, fighting to stay upright. I didn't take the bracelet, I gasped, tears streaming down my face. And I need to go to the hospital now. Veronica moved closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. You know what? I'm going to tell Daniel something. A little secret I've been saving, and then we'll see how concerned he is about your little performance. She walked over to Daniel and whispered in his ear. I couldn't hear what she said, but I watched his face change. Confusion, then shock, then something dark and angry. He strode over to me and grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my flesh. We're leaving now. Daniel, what did she? Don't. He snarled, his eyes blazing. Don't say another word. He dragged me through the house, ignoring my protests, ignoring my pleas to slow down. Patricia and Lauren stood in the foyer, watching with cold satisfaction. Veronica smirked from the staircase. Daniel, please, you're hurting me, I cried as he yanked me out the front door. He shoved me toward our Lexus SUV, opening the passenger door with such force it bounced back. Get in the car. What did Veronica tell you? I demanded, even as another contraction started building. Whatever she said, it's a lie. You know your sister hates me. Get in the car. Each word was bitten off, harsh and furious. Terrified and in pain, I climbed into the passenger seat. Daniel slammed the door and got behind the wheel, starting the engine with a roar. He peeled out of the circular driveway, gravel spraying behind us. Where are we going? I asked, gripping the door handle as he took a turn too fast. He didn't answer. His jaw was clenched, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. We weren't heading toward our house in Scottsdale. We were driving in the opposite direction, toward the desert roads that led out of the city. Daniel, you're scaring me, I said, my voice breaking. Please just tell me what Veronica said. How long? He finally spat out, his voice thick with contempt. How long have you been lying to me? I haven't been lying about anything. Really? Because Veronica just told me something very interesting. She said she saw text messages on your phone last week when you left it on the kitchen counter. Messages to a guy named Ryan. Messages about meeting up. About how much you missed him. My blood ran cold. Ryan. My ex-boyfriend from nursing school who had reached out 3 months ago through social media. We'd exchanged maybe 5 messages total, catching up about mutual friends, about our lives. Nothing inappropriate, nothing secret. Ryan is a friend from school, I said quickly, trying to explain. He messaged me on social media. We talked about people we both knew. That's it. There was nothing romantic, nothing inappropriate. I didn't mention it because there was nothing to mention. You expect me to believe that? Daniel's voice dripped with scorn. That you just happened to be messaging your ex-boyfriend and it meant nothing? It didn't, Daniel. I've never cheated on you. I wouldn't. I love you. Another contraction hit, more intense than the others. I cried out, pressing my hand against my stomach. Daniel, please. I need to go to the hospital. The baby. Stop it, he shouted, his voice cracking with rage. Stop with the fake contractions and the lies. I'm so sick of your manipulation. My mother was right about you from the beginning. You trapped me with this pregnancy, and now you're trying to trap me with fake medical emergencies and stolen jewelry. I didn't steal anything. And these contractions are real, Daniel, I'm begging you. Something's wrong. I can feel it. He wasn't listening. The SUV climbed into the foothills outside the city, the roads becoming narrower, less traveled. The sun was starting to set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. Finally, he pulled off onto a dirt road that led nowhere. No houses, no other cars, just scrub brush and rocks and the darkening sky. Get out, he said. I stared at him. What? Get out of my car. Get out of my life. I'm done with your lies, your theft, your constant drama. You want to play games? Fine. Walk home. Daniel, we're in the middle of nowhere. It's getting dark. I'm 9 months pregnant. Should have thought about that before you stole from my sister and cheated on me, he said coldly. Panic clawed at my throat. I didn't do either of those things. And even if I had, you can't just leave me here. This is dangerous. He reached across me and opened the passenger door. Get out or I'll drag you out. There was something in his eyes I'd never seen before. A hardness, a cruelty. In that moment I realized I didn't know this man at all. The Daniel I'd married, the one who'd promised to love and cherish me, was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed. Another contraction seized me, and this one was different. Stronger, lower. There was a sudden gush of warmth between my legs, soaking through my dress. My water just broke. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Daniel looked at the wet seat, his face contorting with disgust. You're unbelievable. Pissing yourself to get sympathy. Get out of my car before you ruin the leather. Daniel, my water broke. That means the baby is coming. I need a hospital right now. You need to learn that your manipulations don't work on me anymore, he said. Out. Now. I couldn't believe this was happening. Couldn't process that my husband, the father of my child, was actually going to abandon me in labor on a deserted road. But when he put his hand on my shoulder and started shoving me toward the open door, survival instinct kicked in. I stumbled out of the SUV, my legs barely holding me up. The desert air was cooling rapidly as the sun sank lower. I had no phone. I had left it in my purse at Patricia's house. No water, no way to call for help. Daniel, please, I sobbed, my voice cracking. Please don't do this. I'll die out here. The baby will die. He looked at me through the open door, his expression blank. Maybe you should have thought about that before you became a lying thief. Then he pulled the door shut, put the SUV in reverse and backed down the dirt road. I watched in disbelief as he turned around and drove away, his taillights eventually disappearing around a curve. I was alone. The first thing I did was try to walk. I made it maybe 20 feet before another contraction doubled me over, and I realized walking was impossible. The contractions were coming every 3 or 4 minutes now, hard and fast. This was active labor, exactly what my doctor had warned me about. With my complications, rapid labor could be catastrophic. I sank down beside a large rock, trying to think through the pain and fear. It was Sunday evening. We were on a dirt road that didn't look frequently traveled. No one knew where I was. Daniel had my phone. Even if someone realized I was missing, how would they find me? The temperature continued to drop. Desert nights were cold, sometimes dipping into the 40s this time of year. I was wearing a thin maternity dress, nothing warm. The contractions were getting stronger, closer together. I needed help and I needed it fast. I tried to stand again, thinking maybe I could make it to the main road, flag down a passing car. But the moment I got to my feet, another contraction hit with such intensity that I collapsed, crying out into the empty desert. That's when I heard it. An engine. The faint sound of a vehicle approaching on the dirt road. Hope surged through me, a desperate, frantic surge. Help! I screamed, my voice raw. Please help me. A beat-up pickup truck came around the bend, and I'd never been so grateful to see another human being in my life. The truck stopped, and an older man with weathered skin and kind eyes jumped out. Jesus Christ, ma'am, what are you doing out here? He asked, rushing over to me. My husband left me. I gasped, the words tumbling out. I'm in labor. My water broke. Please, I need a hospital. His name was Frank Miller, and he was a rancher who lived 5 miles down the road. He helped me into his truck, talking calmly the whole time, telling me it was going to be okay. He called 911 on his cell phone, giving them our location, then started driving toward the main highway where an ambulance could meet us. We didn't make it. Halfway to the highway, the contractions became continuous. I felt the overwhelming urge to push. The baby's coming. I panted, my body racked with pain. I can't stop it. Frank pulled over and ran around to my side of the truck. What happened next was a blur of pain and fear and this stranger's steady voice telling me to breathe, to push, to stay with him. 20 minutes later, my daughter was born in the cab of a pickup truck on a desert road, delivered by a 67-year-old cattle rancher who hadn't delivered a baby since his own grandchildren. She was tiny, too tiny. She wasn't crying the way babies should. Frank wrapped her in his flannel shirt and laid her on my chest, and I saw her lips were blue. The ambulance arrived 10 minutes later. The paramedics worked frantically on my daughter while I lay in the back of the truck, bleeding more than I should have been, watching them bag her tiny face, trying to get her to breathe properly. At the hospital, they took her straight to the NICU. Premature, they said, though I tried to tell them I was 38 weeks. Respiratory distress, possible infection from prolonged rupture of membranes. They wouldn't let me see her. Not until they'd stabilized both of us. I ended up needing emergency surgery for postpartum hemorrhaging. The preeclampsia had worsened during labor, my blood pressure skyrocketing to dangerous levels. The doctor said if Frank hadn't found me when he did, if my daughter had been born even 30 minutes later, we both would have died. I woke up in a hospital room 24 hours later. A kind nurse named Angela sat beside my bed, and when she saw I was awake, she smiled gently. Welcome back, Mama. You gave us quite a scare. My baby. I croaked, my throat raw. Where's my baby? She's in the NICU. She's stable, breathing on her own now. She's a fighter, that one. 5 pounds 3 ounces. They'll bring you to see her soon. My husband, I said, a flicker of bewildered hope. Has he come? Does he know? Angela's expression changed. Mrs. Whitmore, the police want to speak with you when you're feeling up to it. The police? I'd been so focused on surviving, on my baby surviving, that I hadn't thought about the consequences of what Daniel had done. He'd abandoned his pregnant wife in active labor on a deserted road. That wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. Detective Raymond Cross was in his 50s with tired eyes that had seen too much. He sat beside my bed with a notepad and asked me to tell him everything. So I did. Patricia's birthday brunch, the contractions, the accusation about the bracelet, Veronica's whispered lie about the messages, Daniel's rage, the deserted road, being thrown out of the car while my water was breaking. Your husband returned to his parents' house around 7 o'clock that evening, Detective Cross said, his voice flat. According to witnesses, he was celebrating. Said he'd finally freed himself from a manipulative wife. He was drinking champagne with his family when we arrived at 8:30. How did you know to look for me? I asked, my voice weak. Frank Miller called us from the ambulance. Told us what you'd said about being abandoned. We went to the Whitmore estate to question your husband. His response to being told his wife had given birth in a stranger's truck was. He paused, checking his notes. He said she was probably faking it until someone found her. Even when we told him you and the baby were in critical condition, he showed no concern. His mother backed up his story that you'd been faking contractions all day. Said you'd stolen valuable jewelry, and were probably running away when you got caught in your lie. I didn't steal anything, I said weakly, my heart pounding with a fresh wave of disbelief. The bracelet. We found the bracelet, Detective Cross interrupted. It was in Veronica Whitmore's jewelry box in her bedroom. She admitted she'd never actually lost it. She made up the theft to give her brother an excuse to get angry at you. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical pain. They planned it. Veronica had orchestrated the whole thing, and Daniel had gone along with it. Mrs. Whitmore, I need to ask you a difficult question, the detective said gently. Do you want to press charges against your husband? Did I? Daniel had left me to die. He'd left our daughter to die because his sister had lied about some text messages. Because his mother had convinced him I was faking a medical emergency. Yes, I whispered, the word feeling both small and incredibly powerful. I want to press charges. By the way, if you're as stunned as I was by the depths of this betrayal, please hit that subscribe button. There are so many more unbelievable twists coming, and your support means the world. The news hit the local media like a bomb. Wealthy car dealer's son abandons pregnant wife during labor. The story had everything. Money, cruelty, a near tragedy in the desert. Daniel was arrested and charged with reckless endangerment, criminal negligence, and aggravated assault. Bail was set at $200,000. Patricia paid it immediately. Over the next week, while my daughter, I named her Hope Catherine, fought for her life in the NICU, the Whitmores launched a coordinated attack on my character. They hired a publicist who painted me as an unstable gold digger who trapped their son into marriage. They leaked selective details to friendly reporters, claiming I'd been faking medical problems throughout my pregnancy, that I'd threatened to hurt myself for attention, that I'd stolen from them repeatedly. Veronica even gave an interview to a local news station, crying on camera about how I'd terrorized her family, how she feared for her brother's safety, how Daniel had simply been trying to remove himself from a dangerous situation when I'd thrown myself from his moving vehicle. It was like watching reality get rewritten in real time. But they'd underestimated one thing: Frank Miller. The old rancher was furious about the lies being told. He gave his own interview describing exactly what he'd found. A woman alone in the desert, in active labor, terrified and abandoned. He described delivering my daughter, seeing her struggle to breathe. He described the blood, the fear, the desperate race to save 2 lives. That man left his wife and baby to die, Frank said on camera, his voice shaking with anger. I don't care how much money he has or what lies his family tells. I know what I saw. That woman didn't throw herself from a moving vehicle. She was dumped on that road like trash. The tide of public opinion shifted. Other people came forward. Carmela, the Whitmore's housekeeper, gave a statement about the family's treatment of me during my pregnancy. One of Patricia's friends admitted she'd witnessed Patricia berating me about my weight at a charity luncheon. A former employee at one of the dealerships revealed Daniel had a history of aggressive behavior when he didn't get his way. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Catherine Rodriguez, who'd taken my case pro bono after reading about it in the news, filed for an emergency restraining order against Daniel and his entire family. Then she filed for divorce and sole custody of Hope. Hope came home from the hospital 3 weeks after she was born. Still tiny, still fragile, but alive. The NICU nurses had fallen in love with her during her stay, and they knitted her tiny hats and blankets for when she left. Angela, the nurse who'd been with me that first day, held her during her last feeding before discharge and cried. You're both survivors, she told me, her eyes wet. Don't forget that. I moved into a small apartment with help from a local women's shelter that provided assistance to domestic violence victims. Because that's what I was. Catherine helped me understand. What Daniel had done wasn't just abandonment. It was violence. An attempt to cause serious harm. The criminal trial was set for 4 months later. In the meantime, Daniel's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to get the charges reduced or dismissed. They argued he hadn't known I was really in labor, that I'd given him reason to doubt my medical claims, that Veronica's information about the messages had justified his anger. None of it worked. The prosecutor, a woman named Amanda Chan, who'd built a career on holding wealthy defendants accountable, wasn't backing down. She had Frank's testimony. She had the paramedic statements about the condition they'd found me in. She had the NICU records showing Hope's life-threatening condition at birth. She had the recordings of Daniel at his parents' house, celebrating his freedom while his wife and daughter were fighting for their lives. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I had to sit in that courtroom and listen to Daniel's lawyers call me a liar, a manipulator, a thief. I had to watch them put witnesses on the stand who claimed I'd faked symptoms throughout my pregnancy. Patricia testified that I'd always been dramatic, that she'd never seen any evidence of real medical problems. Then Catherine put my obstetrician on the stand. Dr. Michelle Harper brought my complete medical records, documenting every complication, every warning, every instance where she told me to go to the hospital immediately if I experienced certain symptoms. She described gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, the very real risk of maternal and fetal death. She testified that based on the timeline, I'd been in active labor when Daniel had dumped me on that road, that every moment of delay had put both our lives at greater risk. Frank testified, describing in vivid detail what he found and what he'd done. Several jurors were crying by the time he finished. The prosecutor played the 911 recording from the ambulance. My voice screaming in pain. The paramedics' terse updates about my condition. Patient is hemorrhaging. Blood pressure 190/110. Need immediate transport. Finally, Catherine called me to the stand. I told my story. All of it. The months of emotional abuse from Patricia. Veronica's obvious resentment. The birthday brunch. The contractions they'd all dismissed. The accusation about the bracelet. The whispered lie about Ryan. Daniel's rage. The dirt road being pushed from the car while my water was breaking. Watching his taillights disappear. Thinking I was going to die alone in the dark. Daniel's lawyer tried to break me during cross-examination. Asked why I hadn't insisted harder on going to the hospital. Asked why I'd gone to the brunch at all if I wasn't feeling well. Asked about the messages with Ryan, implying I'd been emotionally unfaithful. Your client left me on a deserted road while I was in labor, I said, my voice steady, no longer shaking. He knew my water had broken. He saw it. He just didn't care. You can try to justify that however you want, but the truth is simple. He valued his pride more than our daughter's life, more than my life. And when he got home and found out we'd survived, he celebrated. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found Daniel guilty on all charges. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in prison, the maximum allowed under the sentencing guidelines. Mr. Whitmore, the judge said, his voice ringing with authority, you made a conscious choice to endanger your wife and unborn child because your feelings were hurt. Your actions were not those of a scared or confused husband. They were the actions of a cruel man who valued his ego over human life. You left Mrs. Whitmore in a situation where she and your daughter could easily have died, and you did so deliberately. This court finds your behavior reprehensible. Patricia screamed from the gallery that it was unjust. Veronica called me a liar. Security had to escort them from the courtroom. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. I got sole legal and physical custody of Hope. Daniel was granted supervised visitation once he was released from prison, but only if he completed anger management and parenting classes. The judge ordered him to pay child support, a significant amount given his family's wealth, and half my medical bills from the birth. The Whitmores tried to fight the custody arrangement, claiming I was an unfit mother who'd alienated their son from his child. Catherine shut that down with prejudice, pointing out that their son was in prison for abandoning said child during her birth. But here's where the real revenge started. I'd been following the Whitmore family's business dealings during the trial, researching everything I could find. The dealerships, the real estate investments, the board positions. Lawrence Whitmore sat on the board of several local charities and businesses. Patricia was heavily involved in social clubs and fundraising. All of it depended on reputation. 6 months after the trial, I started a blog. I called it Hope Story, and used it to document our journey, my pregnancy complications, the abuse I'd endured, the night in the desert, Hope's time in the NICU, our recovery. I wrote beautifully, carefully, making sure every word was true and provable. The blog went viral. Major news outlets picked it up. I was invited to speak at events about domestic violence, about high-risk pregnancies, about surviving narcissistic abuse. I partnered with several charities that supported pregnant women in crisis situations. Every interview I gave, I thanked Frank Miller by name. I talked about how a complete stranger had shown me more care and compassion than my own husband. Frank became something of a local hero. People sent him letters and gifts. Someone started a GoFundMe for his ranch that raised over $50,000. The Whitmore's reputation crumbled. Lawrence was asked to step down from 2 corporate boards. Patricia was removed as chair of her favorite charity's fundraising committee after major donors threatened to pull their support. The dealership saw a significant drop in sales as people chose to take their business elsewhere. Veronica lost her job at a prestigious marketing firm after her employer decided her involvement in the Bracelet lie made her a liability. She tried to sue me for defamation, but Catherine got the suit dismissed almost immediately. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, and everything I'd said about Veronica was documented fact. The Arizona Republic ran a feature article about the case and its aftermath. They interviewed medical experts about the dangers I'd faced, legal experts about the precedent the case had set, and domestic violence advocates about the importance of holding wealthy abusers accountable. Daniel's appeals were denied. He would serve his full sentence. 3 years after that night in the desert, I was invited to speak at a medical conference about high-risk pregnancy and the importance of believing patients about their symptoms. Sitting in the audience was Dr. Harper, my obstetrician, along with several of the NICU nurses who'd cared for Hope, including Angela. After my talk, they gave me a standing ovation. Hope was 3 now, healthy and thriving. She had her first birthday party surrounded by people who actually loved her. Frank and his wife, Maria, Catherine and her family, nurses from the hospital, volunteers from the women's shelter, my parents who'd stood by me through everything. No one from the Whitmore family was invited or welcome. Frank walked me out to my car that night, carrying Hope on his shoulders while she giggled and patted his bald head. You know, he said, his voice soft. When I found you that night, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. Didn't realize I was helping someone who'd go on to help so many others. I learned from the best, I told him, squeezing his arm. You showed me what real kindness looks like. The final piece of revenge came 3 years after the trial. Daniel was released from prison after serving 3.5 years with good behavior. He immediately violated the custody agreement by showing up at Hope's preschool, trying to take her without permission or supervision. The school called the police and me. I arrived to find Daniel being handcuffed while Hope stood safely inside with her teacher, completely unaware of the drama. She didn't recognize him. To her, he was just a scary stranger. That violation sent him back to court where the judge revoked his visitation rights entirely. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, "you have learned nothing. You continue to believe the rules don't apply to you, that your wants supersede everyone else's safety. Your daughter is better off without you in her life." Patricia tried to sue for grandparent visitation rights. Catherine buried her in legal motions and the judge denied the petition. This court finds that the Whitmore family enabled and continues to enable Mr. Whitmore's dangerous behavior. The ruling stated, "Their presence in this child's life would pose a risk to her emotional and physical well-being." I framed that ruling and hung it in my home office. Today, Hope is 5 years old. She's bright, funny, fearless. She knows she was born under difficult circumstances, explained in age-appropriate terms. "Mommy was sick. Some people weren't very nice, but good people helped us." She knows Frank is Uncle Frank and loves visiting his ranch to see the horses. She calls Catherine Aunt Catherine, and proudly tells people her aunt is a lawyer who helps people. She has no idea who the Whitmores are, and if I have my way, she never will. I finished my degree in nursing administration, and now run programs for a nonprofit that provides medical care to underserved women. I speak regularly about my experience, helping other women recognize abuse and advocating for better treatment of high-risk pregnancy patients. The Whitmores are still in Phoenix, but their social standing never recovered. Their dealerships are struggling. Lawrence retired early. Patricia stopped going to her clubs after being snubbed too many times. Veronica moved to California to escape the stigma. Daniel lives in a small apartment, works at one of his father's dealerships in a low-level position, and has supervised therapy sessions twice a week as a condition of his probation. His lawyer sends annual requests to revisit the custody arrangement. Catherine denies them all with a simple citation of his violation history. Sometimes people ask me if I regret marrying Daniel. I don't, because that marriage, as painful as it was, gave me hope, taught me what real strength looks like. It showed me who I could become when stripped of everything except the will to survive. That night on the desert road, Daniel thought he was punishing me. He thought he was teaching me a lesson about my place, about how I'd supposedly wronged his family. Instead, he gave me the greatest gift possible, clarity. Clarity about who he really was, who his family really was, and who I needed to be. Last month, Hope and I were at the grocery store when we ran into Veronica. She looked older, tired. She saw us and froze. Hope was chattering about the cookie she wanted to buy, completely oblivious. Veronica opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. Then she saw my expression, calm, cold, completely unmoved, and closed it again. She turned and walked away. I'd once begged these people to believe me, to help me, to show basic human decency. I'd cried and pleaded and tried so hard to be good enough for them. Now, I didn't need anything from them. Not acknowledgement, not apology, not redemption. They were nothing to me. Frank once told me that the desert teaches you what's essential, that anything that can't survive the heat and the cold and the isolation gets burned away, leaving only what's real and true and strong. Daniel had left me in the desert to die, but the desert had made me. Hope tugged on my hand, pulling me back to the present. "Mommy, can we get the chocolate chip ones?" "Sure, baby," I said, lifting her into my arms. "We can get whatever you want." Because we'd survived. We'd more than survived. We built a life full of people who chose to love us, who showed up when it mattered, who proved that family isn't about blood or money or social standing. It's about who stays when things get hard, who delivers babies in pickup trucks on desert roads, who fights for justice even when the defendant has money and power, who loves a little girl with their whole heart simply because she deserves to be loved. The Whitmores lost everything that mattered. Their reputation, their influence, their connection to hope, because they chose cruelty over compassion, because they valued appearances over humanity, because they thought money and status would insulate them from consequences. They were wrong. And that, more than any legal judgment or social ostracism, is the sweetest revenge of all. They have to live every day knowing they lost something precious because they weren't worthy of it. Meanwhile, Hope and I are surrounded by love, building a future they'll never be part of. Daniel had thrown me away like trash on a dark road, certain he'd never have to think about me again. Instead, I became impossible to ignore, not because I sought attention but because I transformed survival into purpose. Every woman I help, every speech I give, every life saved by better medical protocols, I helped develop is a reminder that his cruelty didn't break me. It made me matter. Hope asked me recently why she doesn't have a daddy like some of her friends. I told her the truth simply. Some people aren't ready to be good parents, but you have so many people who love you. You have me, Uncle Frank and Aunt Maria, Aunt Catherine, all your friends at school. We're your family and will always be here. That's okay, she said thoughtfully, looking up at me. I like our family. Me too, baby. Me too. What about you? Have you ever faced such a profound betrayal that it completely reshaped your life for the better? Let me know in the comments below. I truly want to hear your stories.